Good evening, everyone. Give everyone just another minute to jump in here. All right, let's get it started. What did we do yesterday?
We worked on the wireframe.
We
And
did work on the wireframe. What
we
screens
also used
did
a
we
route. Sorry,
get finished on the wireframe?
we got done login,
Yep,
customers.
yep.
Um, we got done. I think the nav and
I think we also did the appliances screen and then the services order screen. And so the reason why we drew the line there is we want to start thinking about our processes, right? So it's going to take all three of those screens to create a service order. But we want to just start thinking through, okay, what can we break into chunk size pieces and get fully accomplished, right? Because otherwise it can be this insurmountable task of, oh my God, there's so much I have to do here. How do I even know what I'm going to do? Where do I start? All of that kind of stuff. So breaking it down into the process and thinking about, all right, what's it going to take to just create a service order? And that's where we kind of focused and said, let's get our wireframes, which are feeling a little bit more mock-up-y at this point. Let's get those done so we can focus on, all right, let's
I think you're lagging.
Did we lose Max?
if you guys can even hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, my internet connection is unstable. Lucky me. Amazing we've gotten this far in the program and not had a unstable internet connection. Okay, well, while I log into my router and figure that out, did anyone say anything that I didn't repeat? What else did we do yesterday other than banging through those wireframes?
We started our React. No, yeah, the
Yep.
React, and we did our components. We routed.
Yeah. Yep. So lots to touch in on there. We did our Create React app. I think this is probably the fifth or sixth time we've done that at this point. So hopefully that's getting to be a little bit more familiar. We cleared out all of that boilerplate code that is in there. That's a good term to know if you have not heard that before. Boilerplate or basically starter code, just something to get you started. We cleared all of that out. We got our React router working. Hopefully we had a good example of debugging and what it takes to kind of go through step by step when you don't have a helpful stack trace to figure out where the issue is. So we covered not only React router, but all of its components like switch and route. So we got all of that started as well. We got a basic login page in, and we got that linked, so it's taking us into the app. So that was all good. Then we got started on our sidebar, and I think that's where we left off. But Carolyn, yeah, you summed it up pretty well. Is we took our mock-up and we started coding that out and lining up the components that we were planning to use in those wireframes or mock-ups, and started lining them to the Bootstrap components as well. Anything else that we covered yesterday? Any light bulb moments? Anything that you reviewed yesterday and went, how the hell did he do that? Anything like that?
I had a question about the inline styling, because we haven't really done much of that, and we haven't done any of it in React. So the double curly braces, I looked it up and it said that to import or to style an element with inline style attribute, the value must be a JavaScript object in React. So is one set of those brackets for the object and the other one is just for like the React? Okay.
You hit the nail on the head. Yeah, the first set of the brackets is just telling React, hey, there's some JavaScript value coming. So it's kind of doing the same thing a template literal is doing, but the template literal does it with the $ and then the curly braces.
Right. Well, and we use those curly braces for that same purpose and other things in React, but it did seem a little odd because it seems like most of the other things you use those curly braces for in React are things that you're like taking from another part of your program somewhere, like a function that you've written or props or something like that. So it just seemed a little odd that it wasn't quotes.
Yeah, the only pretty much universally in React, the outer curly braces always means stop evaluating this as HTML and evaluate whatever is coming inside of this as JavaScript.
Okay,
right?
And it does that because it's an object. You're making it an object by putting the second curly braces, and that's
exactly. Those inner curly braces are saying, hey, an object's coming in, but there are plenty of times that we use the outer curly braces and then do something like, array.map, and then we do that in there. So
I was just asking because that is CSS, not JavaScript. So, but it makes it into JavaScript with the second set of curly braces, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it is not a one-for-one in the CSS to JavaScript object for styling, right? Margin top is not margin dash top. It is margin capital T op. So there are slight differences there. We do camel case them, but you hit the nail on the head, Kyle, of we use the outer ones as basic JSX to say, hey, some JavaScript is coming in between this. And then the inner ones are saying, oh, and that JavaScript just happens to be an object.
And the fact that you said it's JavaScript actually explains the quotes around the second, because you don't usually put that when you're doing CSS separately in its own file. So
Correct.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yes, it is. It is a straight up object. That is a great question. Any other questions spanning anything from React to Bootstrap to anything in the front end to anything you got at all? Okie doke. Oh, go ahead, Latonia.
Well, okay, so I got in the habit of thinking that you want to put your components and things in the app.js as opposed to importing like in various component files. So can you just talk a little bit about that? Because when I was going back through it, I was like, oh, wait a minute, like we're doing it in various files.
Yeah, great question.
I mean, it's kind of a convoluted question, but
no, it's a good one, and something that I had to be careful thinking through when I was doing this on the fly last night. I had that thought of, oh, well, sidebar is going to be in pretty much every component we use, and so is the nav bar. So why are we putting that in the customers component instead of just putting that in app.js? So you want to be careful of sidebar, yes, is going to be in every single page that we use except one of them, and that's going to be our login screen. So we have to be really careful that we're not using the components high up like in app if we want that component to not show up on certain pages like the login screen. So I probably took more of what's the easy way out and said, all right, let me just throw the nav bar into the customer screen and let it be. We could probably spend 15, 20 minutes restructuring it. So we actually made some kind of component called like logged in user or app wrapper or something like that, that took care of all of the nav bar and the sidebar for us. And then we would put the router actually kind of inside that column 9, right? Because our nav bar, we want to always show up, our sidebar, we always want to show up, and that sidebar is taking up 3 columns. And then we've got 9 columns left. So we could actually create some page called like app router or app navigation or something like that. And that component would have our nav bar in it and our grid and our col 3. And then in the col 9 that was left, we could put our router directly in that col 9, and that's what would figure out what would show up. So there is definitely value sometimes in making a sitemap, or more of a component hierarchy might be a better way of thinking about it. Of, okay, we talk about parent-child components all the time, and we've proven that we can put components and components and components and components and really nest down deep. So what hierarchy makes sense? And that is something that I can either cover in office hours on Saturday. And reminder, that is Saturday at 10 a.m. Yeah, Saturday at 10 a.m. I can cover kind of reorganizing that then. Or if we have time at the end of class, I'm probably kidding myself that we're going to run out of things to do. But if we do have time at the end of class, I can talk about kind of reshuffling the component hierarchy. So we don't have to put the sidebar in every single component. Which would definitely be a much cleaner design than how I'm doing it, which is, oh, by the way, all of these pages except this one is going to have the sidebar and the nav bar. So definitely better ways of structuring it. I just kind of took the easy way out. To the end user, they're going to have no idea, right? The sidebar is the sidebar. We're reusing the code. Everything's fine. Where it would make a difference is when you're getting in and you're looking at the code and you're going, wow, you made a reusable component, but you're reusing that component on every single page. Wouldn't it make more sense to reuse that component in some kind of nav component, and then you wouldn't have to reuse it over and over again? Go ahead.
No, I was just saying thank you. It sounded like you were going to continue, but I did have a separate question.
No, I was just gonna add one more thing onto it. It's one of those things that it's probably hard to understand without a visual. And so we could either I could try and figure out some kind of visual for that, or we can just try and approach it code-wise to see if that makes something click. And if it doesn't, I can still come up with some kind of visual for that. But we will save that to the end of class, and then loop back and see if we can clean some of that code up, which is a good example of refactoring and a part of this whole process.
And then did we do something with link? Because I went through, I got my stuff all set up, and then I got the error message about link. So should I be starting with an error message today, or did I miss something?
So you want to be careful. Is it an error message or is it a warning?
Nope, it's definitely red. It says error. Link is a void element tag. It must neither have children nor use dangerously set inner HTML. I don't recall doing any of that though.
Ooh, you made React cranky, didn't you?
But how? I mean, the link is in there. You had it in there, but I don't see where you use link anywhere. We imported it, but we never used it. So I would expect a different message.
We did use it on the login page. And what we did is we made the button be surrounded by a link tag. And when you click the login button, it took you to the customers page.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But my guess is check your import on when you're using that link and make sure that that link is coming from React Router DOM and not some other place. And Shaw also threw out a good point. Make sure you're using a capital L for link and not lowercase, because we want to use the link component coming from React Router DOM We don't want to use the generic link tag in HTML, which we've seen for linking style sheets. So your import looks good there, but Latonia, if you go down to where you're actually using it around the button, do you have a capital L there as well? So Shaw, thank you for throwing that out. That will definitely get you. You want to figure out what link are we trying to use? Are we using the link tag that we use in the head to pull in style sheets? Or are we using the link that React Router DOM is providing for us? And that is a good reason of why we always uppercase our components, because what if we make a component called head? Well, all of a sudden it's like, well, head's a reserved word. Head is your HTML. So when you put another head in there, you'd be like, HTML would be like, what's going on? Why are there two heads? And you're like, no, that's my component that I want to use called head. And so that's why you want to use a capital H for any of your components that you create. Glad you asked, and great example of collaboration to fix the issue. Any other questions before we dive in?
Can I just clarify? So I changed it to a capital 1, but don't I have to structure it? You know how components don't have the closing tag, but now I'm having issues with an opening and closing tag around my button.
Nothing saying components can't have a closing tag.
Oh, okay.
When you use props.children, that's a good example of you can actually put children components into the tag itself. So it is possible that components are self-closing components and close without a closing tag, but there's no rule in React that says that they have to be self-closing. It is entirely possible to have children inside of it. Switch is a good example of that. Switch has multiple roots inside of it. The browser router is a good example of that, and the link tag is a good example of that as well. So nothing to apologize for. I think that all great questions. Carolyn, if you are not caught up from yesterday, you should pull from the Git repository, the Git classroom repo. Go ahead and pull that. That is all up to date as of last night. And our starting point is going to be module 7, week 2, day 2. And again, even though it was Wednesday's code, it is day 2 because we actually skipped for OpenHack. So the code for tonight will be in module 7, week 2, day 3 by the time we are done with it. If you are all caught up from yesterday and you managed to code along with me at Roadrunner speed, you do not have to pull anything. If you are not caught up, feel free to pull the classroom repo, copy week 7, module 7, week 2, day 2, copy that entire folder into your My Code folder in whatever organization system you're using. And that's what we're going to use as our starting point tonight. So encourage anyone to do that now that needs to, because I know node modules can take a couple minutes to copy over. And then you are going to want to run npm install in your My Code folder once you have it copied over. Carolyn, question.
Yeah, so I didn't keep up all the way, so I copied and pasted for now, just so I'd have the code. So I am up to date then.
Yes.
You didn't do anything like later last night or anything?
Nope.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I did, but I backed it all out because I wanted to cover it today.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And I'm not going to cheat, I promise.
Oh, it's fine. I'm gonna know you're gonna cheat
I
because
know.
the assignment will be to turn in your version of this app, right? So even if you're coding along, which I'm not discouraging you from doing, nor am I encouraging you from doing it. If you learn by coding along, or if you learn by copying and pasting, that's fine. But the homework assignment for this weekend, in addition to the wireframes, which is already assigned, will be to get your project setup done. So just having your Express app up and running, having Sequelize up and running, and having your React front end up and running will be the assignment for tonight, or for this weekend, I mean, with React Router thrown in that mix. I will post all of that in Google Classroom with all the requirements and the what needs to be done for that assignment. But the goal is, I think for next week, and I'm still hesitant on this, will be for you to build a section of this app based off of your own design with your own styling, your own flair on it. So if you kind of copy and paste everything that I'm doing, I'm going to look at it and go, well, this looks exactly like mine. That's not completely right. Obviously, it doesn't have to be its unique unicorn and look completely different and, you know, wow me on the design. But there are multiple ways of designing an app. I'm just kind of reaching for my toolkit and what I know. You know, the homework will be for you to create a section of this app. You don't have to do the whole thing. Latonia, yeah, if you're finding sections of this app that you're like, oh man, this is really good, I could reuse that over in my capstone, then definitely you can take this code and reuse it over in your capstone. That's completely fine. The table structure may be a little different, but the goal here is that we are not only having light bulb moments, but we're getting all those light bulbs firing on a string of lights, right? The goal here is to make it so when you're working your way through this, you're going, oh, well, that Sequelize setup, I need that for my capstone as well. Oh, I've got to go create models. Oh, now that I need to do that, I need to get my back end working, right? So the goal here is that you are definitely drawing connections between this appliance and the capstone itself. And once you get it working in the appliance case, feel free to just scoop that code up and dump it right over into your capstone code as well. Whether it's front end, whether it's back end, whether it's the database, doesn't matter, right? The reason why I struggle so much with Sequelize setup is because every time I set up a new Sequelize project, I go find old code where I've done it and just borrow all of that over. And so we will actually be using a lot of our module 8 code that we already covered for getting Sequelize up and running and borrowing that setup over into the appliance case because we've already covered it once. There is a great Giphy of a raccoon coming into, like, there are a bunch of cats around like a food bowl, and the raccoon literally comes in and scoops up the food and grabs it and like runs away with it. That is pretty much the summation of how I code. I just go somewhere else, I find a little code on Stack Overflow or code I've written somewhere else, and I just grab it and run away sneakily as possible with it. So very, very common thing to do, as long as you are understanding the code. All right, any other questions?
Can I just sneak in one more question?
Sure.
What will be the time frame for us getting back the homework? I know it's not due until midnight on Sunday, but I was trying to do stuff that we've been doing for my capstone, and I'm just curious how quickly the turnaround may be.
I should be able to get feedback to you guys by class time on Monday. I can't make any promises on that. The sooner you get in the homework, the better chance you have of getting feedback by Monday, especially if it's done by Sunday morning. With that said, if you would like to get feedback sooner rather than later, feel free to zip up your code and send it to me in Slack. And I'll be much more likely to respond faster to a Slack message than I will be to Google Classroom, only because I tend to wait until everyone's turned it in on Google Classroom and then grade all at once. But if you have something that you're like, oh man, I'm feeling like this is going to be really close to my capstone structure, feel free to send that code over my way in Slack, and I can provide you feedback that way. It might be on my phone while I'm at the beach, but with that said, it will be feedback nonetheless. I know that sounds lovely, but I grew up in a beach town and lived here year round. So me going to the beach is like no big deal anymore for me. Well, it seems like my internet has stabilized, so hopefully that was just a hiccup from earlier. Anyone have any other questions before we dive into today? Susan, is that a hand raise?
Yes, sorry, I was looking for my unmute. Just a quick one. I was rewatching and you did the thing where you select and then you can change everything at once. And you said Command R, I thought, and then I Googled and it was like Command F, but then I'm still having trouble with it. But
Yeah,
it seems like a handy trick.
Command F gives you the find window. And then from the find window, there's a little like drop down arrow that if you click on that, it gives you options to replace as well.
Okay.
Command R should give you that same exact window with the replace open already. So pretty much should be the same exact commands. One, you just have to hit Command F and then click the little drop down arrow. The Command R will just show you the drop down arrow automatically. Oh.
Yeah, Command Option F is what I did. And that's why then Command R wasn't working. Thank you, Kyle. That was the issue. I was like, I could sort of get it halfway and.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder if I modified my key map, my keyboard shortcuts. I can share my screen in case you guys are curious. No, this one. Yeah, so what I did, let me close this. I went to file, I went to the code up at the top and then preferences and then down to keyboard shortcuts. And then I did a search for replace up here at the top. And you see how it says Command R here, but all of these are default. And then you've got the source over here that says user. That means that I screwed with my key map and made it so Command R actually triggered replace because that's the keyboard shortcut that I am most familiar with. But you will notice down here, the same exact thing by default is doing it on Command Option F. This is the option symbol, this is the command symbol, and then F, literally the keyboard letter F. So thank you for calling me out on that, Susan, and by extension, Kyle. It appears that the keyboard shortcut by default is Command Option F, and it's one of those things that I never... It annoyed me that it was Command Option F because in every other text editor I've used, it's Command R. So I just added that mapping in for me. But it should accomplish the same thing if we close out of this and I'm in a file and I hit Command Option F. It just feels wrong in my hand to do it. Sorry, just it should pop open the same thing. But what I was talking about earlier is if we hit Command F, it's going to bring up find. And then all we have to do is click on this little arrow and that gives me the access to replace as well. And what I was doing is I was finding every place there was a class. And this is actually a good example because I slipped and missed one of the class names in here. So if I did a find and replace right now on class and replaced it with class name, if I click on this, you'll see it does my first class name right. But then now I have a class name and a class name. And it's like, oh, I don't want that. So I'm just going to click in here and Command Z it, and that's going to get me back to the find and replace before the find and replace happened. And the trick that I did here was I said, find any place where it is class equals. And what that equals does is it makes it now not match these two because these are class name equals. And then down here, I also have to make sure I add my equals because I am replacing this whole class with a class name. And then if I hit replace on that, it will only replace that one that is not matching. So another great question. Glad that you guys brought that up. Find and replace is one of those things that when you get comfortable with them, it is a very quick way to transform a list into an array. I'll do just a quick example on that. If I've got like A, B, C, D, E, F, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, and I want to get all of that data into an array, there are some quick things that you can do in here. Maybe numbers aren't a good example. Let me just do X, Y, Z and QWE. Okay, so if I go into my replace, I can actually turn on this dot star here. And if you look very closely, it says use regular expression. I know we just barely touched on them, but there's a lot of power in that. So you can actually say, find any place where there is a comma and a space and replace that with a quote, a comma, and a new line, and then start that new line with a quote. And so I know that's super advanced, but if you click on it, you see all of a sudden it added in all of my quotes for me. And so now all we have to do is finish it off with beginning and the end. And we just transformed our list that was comma separated into an array that we could just say const my array equals. And now we've got an array out of it. So find and replace, not like I'm expecting you guys to be able to do that out of the gate or anything, but you can combine find and replace with regular expressions to really transform data quickly. Because if you look at this list, you go, oh, that wouldn't be long to convert it into an array for me. But what if you had a list that looked like this and was super long? Well, now when you do your find and replace, you can see it doing a lot of the work for you. So find and replace, really powerful thing. And just being creative about like, oh, let me add that equals in at the end can really make it find and replace only what you're looking for. The other thing I will mention is that we did a Command Option F to get to that find and replace. You can also use Command Shift F, which will give you access to search. We touched on this a couple weeks ago. I know Latonia picked up on me using this and went, yo, what was that magic that you just did there? That is Command Shift F. The other way you can get to it is by clicking on the little search icon over in the left. And if you notice here, you still get access to regex if you wanted to turn on regular expressions. And if you pop this down, you can also get find and replace, which would search across all of your files in the project and either find them, or if you use this replace button, would replace all of them as well. Sorry, this replace button for replace all. So really powerful stuff that you can just do when you're like, oh, just replace all of my class equals across all of my files with class name equals. You could use that power here. So definitely some cool stuff that you can do. And there are definitely times where I'm like, I'm too lazy to scroll, but I know exactly what code I'm looking for. And so I'll just do a quick Command F and type it in, and it will jump me to the exact spot that I'm looking for in the code. There are some component files that I have that are 4,000 or 5,000 lines long. And when you get to that point, scrolling just isn't efficient anymore. The other thing that I will mention, I don't know if I have any files long enough to really do it in. Maybe my sidebar is long enough. If I'm all the way up at the top here and I want to jump specifically to a line number, I can use Command L. No, maybe not. Command L, and that brings this up. And I can just type in a line number and hit enter, and it will put my cursor there right away. So when you are jumping back between two sections of code in a couple thousand line file, you can use Command L to jump right to the line number that you want. Command L, yeah, Command L. Until another student tells me that I remap that key as well, and it doesn't actually work. Okay, any other questions? I should pull up chat because I cannot see it. Where'd you go? Chat. Command R is for reload or refresh in the browser. Every application has a different key map or different key binding. So it depends what you're looking for. Kyle threw out a good comment of if you go up into the edit menu in the top of the window, you'll see that it includes all of these keyboard shortcuts over on the side. Again, this thing that's got like four loops looks like a clover leaf for anyone who has lived in New Jersey and is familiar with getting on and off highways. that is the command symbol. The arrow up is going to be your shift symbol. This right here, sorry, I can't blow it up, is your option symbol. It looks like a L with a little dash at the top. That is your option symbol. And then down here, that what is on top of the 6 key, the caret up, that means control. And that should cover everything on your keyboard. If you ever forget them, I believe most of those symbols are on your keyboard already, except maybe for the control and shift key. But that might be a little refresher for you as well. Oh no, even the control key has it. So it's just shift that's missing it. I use an external keyboard that has a Windows key in it, and I've remapped everything at the bottom. So now I don't even look at my keyboard anymore, but I realized I have my laptop open. I could just look at that. Other questions. Should all the class in the navbar.js be changed to class name? Yes, they should. And let me pop that open and see if I missed something. Oh yeah, I definitely did. So I'm going to use my fancy find and replace that I already have written to knock those over to class names for me. At some point in the past, I'm going to say 2 years, React started to not get cranky as much when you use class instead of class name. I think that was largely due to when they did the shift from class-based components to functional components. And so all of a sudden, the compiler, when we start the server, has stopped yelling at us and just lets you get away with using class now. It used to be the case that if you forgot a class name, React would blow up quite violently and refuse to show you any of your code. So still best practice to use class name. And in fact, I can't find it anywhere in the React documentation that says, hey, you can actually get away with just using a regular class. But something that you should still be doing is using class name instead of class, even if React doesn't get quite as mad at you as it used to. Lengthy components can be broken up into their own components, but you need to be careful when you do that, especially when you're talking about state, because you need to pass that state around from the parent component into the child component. Or if you have 2 components that you break up into separate children, you do need to watch that state. So it isn't as simple as, oh, let me just take this chunk of HTML and throw it down into its own component, because you need to use props to pass that data around. So you do want to be careful around that. That is when you get into the context API with React. I think hopefully Joey touched on that maybe a little bit without going too much in depth. But the context API is kind of, you can think about it as a global state, this way of being able to access state across multiple components. But that's we call it a sticky wicket. Something we're not going to go too far down into. It's a complex subject that I think that the goal was to give you guys a little exposure to it, to kind of open you up to go, oh, this is a time that we should be using context because we're accessing that state across multiple components. But a good thing to use, React also has a thing called Redux, which is a design methodology or pattern around designing your state in a way that you can make it, it makes it a lot more complex, but in that complexity also brings a simplicity in the design. So Redux is a whole nother realm of state management of, yes, use an REDUX. It is not built into React, and you can use Redux in both Angular and in React. But it is a whole design methodology around state and how do we make our state global. It was something Redux was used before the context API was even around or existed. So there are realms to discover in the state world itself of use state, context, Redux, and then there's another one out there called MOBX, MOBX, or MOBX. I've heard it pronounced both ways. But those are all things to throw out there. So if you're at a job interview and they go, oh, we use Redux with React, you can go, oh, Redux is a state thing. I'm not familiar with Redux in particular, but I'm pretty comfortable with use state and would feel comfortable learning Redux as it is an extension of the state. And so something to consider of when you are applying, or even when you're in these mock interviews, it is entirely possible that the interviewer will say something like, well, we don't use that. And so you need to kind of explore that and say, okay, well, what do you use? Can you tell me what category that's in? And then I can talk a little bit about the experience that I learned in that category and how I'm willing to go learn, what you use for that. The biggest example of that, especially for Syracuse employers, would be .NET. Oh, I don't know .NET, but I've learned full stack app development and I'm familiar with doing backend development using Node and Express. So I know that .NET would be something that I could pick up pretty easily, because at the end of the day, all we're doing is building an API. Doesn't matter what language we're building that API in, the concepts always apply. And that API tends to talk to a database. And, we happen to learn Postgres and SQL. And it also is showing that data on a front end. And those are all things that I'm familiar with. So when you do get a job description, before your interview, definitely do homework on any keywords that you don't recognize and try and get them into a category. So for React, obviously that would be front end. But if you see something that says Angular, the goal there is not to understand all of Angular, but just understand what it's similar to. If we designed the curriculum properly, you shouldn't be finding things on a bunch of full stack job descriptions that you have not learned some comparable thing of. Vue.js is still lagging behind React and Angular, which are by far the two dominant market players. But Vue.js is catching up hugely. And it is a little bit more simple than even React is. And so it is a popular option and arguably could be in the next 5-ish years or so as big of a player as React or Angular is. But a lot of people right now are investing time into rebuilding their front ends in something like Angular or React. As a junior developer, you wouldn't really be required to make the decision between those two, or arguably three with Vue. But you would definitely be expected as a junior developer to say, hey, it's a good thing you know React. We happen to be switching over to Angular. Are you up for learning that? And the answer is hopefully yes.
Could we potentially, maybe, I don't know when, maybe in office hours or at some point with you, because you seem up on all this, like go over like what you or what the tech world thinks is the top things everyone's using, and then like what is all equivalent to that would be like super helpful, because I do keep Googling everything, but sometimes like I didn't really know what .NET was.
Yeah, and that was kind of the goal. If you think all the way back to module 1 of, we had that super long list where we all brainstormed together and started talking about the stack for the first time and what category it goes into and all of that stuff. If there is dead air on Saturday, or if you guys think it would be helpful, we can revisit that list and kind of burn through anything that's on the list. As a reminder, or if you guys have new questions about it, we can go through that. And then we can also add to that list of things that you guys have heard of in the past, 4 months, 5 months now, and add to it and categorize it. Just because we have a good starting point for that. But now that you have learned all of these concepts and actually understand how the puzzle pieces of a stack fit together, you may have more questions about it. And a thing that I want to mention is you may get an interviewer hiring for a technical position that is non-technical. I can't tell you how many times you get someone hiring for a full stack developer who hasn't written a line of code in their life, or who has but hasn't done it for 15 years because they got up into management and their job is now hiring and kind of managing the company, not managing their developers. So that's something to be cautious of, especially if you have that person who hasn't coded in 15 years, because they probably haven't heard of React, right? And so you need to be prepared to say, oh, React is a new framework in kind of like jQuery for writing out your front end in a more efficient manner. And connecting it and saying, oh, it's a framework for a front end should turn some things over. But it is entirely possible that you get an interviewer who thinks Java and JavaScript are the same thing and use them interchangeably, and your head is just about ready to pop off your body because all you want to do is correct them. But also keep in mind that they may just be the screener, right? They just are seeing if you're a good fit, and then they'll move you on to someone more technical. So definitely something to be prepared for is having a non-technical person interviewing you for a technical role. And hopefully the mock interviews, you're going to get people from all different kinds of experiences, mostly local employers, but you are going to get some people who are technical interviewers and may throw you a curveball and give you a coding test the first interview. Or you may get someone who goes and, doesn't know the difference between Java and JavaScript. And that happens and is good experience for the real world, because it definitely happens in the real world. Carolyn, you asked about the naming convention. The naming convention is whatever makes sense. So there tends to be a hierarchy that makes sense. For service orders, we're going to have a service orders page. And from that page, we are going to link to a service order detail page. So that would be the naming convention there. Is it would be either be service orders and service order, where the child would be the individual order, or you would throw something like service order details as the naming convention. Same goes for like the customers page, right? We may make a customers page that has a customers table and then a customers form, which is managing the creation and editing. So the naming convention is, if it makes sense to have a logical break there, then you can follow that naming convention from there.
Right. So going back to the really 4,000 lines of code, and I asked about breaking up those components if you were going to do it. What would the naming convention be in that case? Or is that what we're actually doing?
You can't you can't say hypothetically, what would you name this, right? Like there's always a point where you can look at the code and say, this makes sense to extract this out and call it something else. And based off of what that is, that's how you name it. So if you're looking at let me pull up our wireframe.
I mean, I know it's not something you recommend doing, but I'm just curious.
Oh, I never said I didn't recommend it.
Well, I didn't mean to put words in your mouth, but it's not something, I mean, you don't just do it willy-nilly, because it has a lot of considerations with props and.
You don't do it willy-nilly, but there are definitely times where you go, whoa, this is a lot more code than I anticipated being here. Let me go back and refactor this into 2 components, right? So the way we're going to approach customers today, we're going to do it all in customers.js. But looking at this logically, I can say, oh, it's going to make sense to break this up into at least 2 components. One component will be the customers table, and then the other component is going to be my customers form. And that is exactly what I would name it there, right? Now, we may look at this and go, whoa, there's still a lot of code going on in this table. Maybe I will break the table down into a customers table row component and make every row in this its own component. That's also completely fine to do. You don't want to break too far down, but when your code, you're reaching the point where you're like, there's too much going on here, there should be some logical break. That's when you get in and you start figuring out where that should be. But there's no naming convention where I can say it's always going to be this, right? So it
Pretty
really
logical.
depends on what you're breaking up.
Yeah.
And there tends to be a logical break in the, at least in the interface, and if not the interface, a grouping of functionality, and
Yeah.
that's what you start to name.
So you wouldn't have like, customer, whatever, number one, customer, whatever, number two. I mean, that would not help. Okay, great.
Yep,
Thank you.
and we're gonna cover how we can create one service order detail page, and be able to reuse that service order detail page across all of the service orders that are gonna get created. So that's something that we'll probably cover next week.
Thank you.
Latonia asked a good question about how do we limit the number of characters? Should we worry about that having a name that's too long? In the couple ways of answering that. One, because we're using varchars or strings, that will be limited to 255 characters. So for something like name, in this table, we are keeping first name and last name separate, right? So the database won't actually let us store more than 255 characters. If we were building this app out professionally, I would actually make this turn red and disable this button if the thing typed in was over 255 characters, because the database will automatically truncate it for us. And that may not be something that we want to do, especially if there was something like state where we're expecting 2 letters to be entered. But what if we don't build that out in the front end and type something in like New Jersey into the state? Well, now all of a sudden the database is going to look at NE as the first 2 letters, truncate it, and now my state just changed from New Jersey to New Hampshire, because NE is the state abbreviation for New Hampshire. So we want to be Nebraska. Thank you. New Hampshire is NH. Thank you, Carolyn, for that correction. So we want to be careful around that and think about the UI. There are different places you can do form validation. You can do form validation in the front end and say, hey, don't let them hit the submit button. But if they're being particularly cheeky, they can look at the network request and figure out, oh, I can bypass your front end and make a call to the back end directly that's inserting that data. So you also want to do form validation on the server itself and validate that data before you insert it into the database. I don't know how much of that we're going to be able to cover. By the time we're done with this app, we may be at 1,000 lines. If I were to do this app for an actual client, I would be at 10,000 lines before I was done. So there is a lot that we could cover in this app, a lot of functionality. The goal is just to kind of touch on topics that are hopefully going to kickstart something for your capstone. But there is all kinds of stuff that we could cover there. All right, any other things that you guys want to bear through me rambling on and on about? You guys have yet to catch me completely off guard on a question. So you're running out of time. Just today's class and next week left. So really ramp up the difficulty of that question if you want to catch me off guard.
I don't think this is difficult for you, but it has been bugging me because a lot of times I'll get the response that my name is not valid because I have an apostrophe in there. Which one is it? I keep using string, thinking string is the one that allows you to use it, but also my name is like really long and it's usually cut off. So isn't that text?
It is 255 is the default for string or varchar in most SQL-based databases. So while your name is long, it isn't 255 characters long. So what that tells me is that the database designer thought, oh, what's the average length of a first name? We'll limit it to 20 characters or 15 characters. So just because they're using a varchar doesn't mean that it will be a length of 255. It just means that the default length is 255, but they can impose a limit that is smaller on it on top of that. So ideally, you would have a user interface that when you typed in your name, it would light up red and say, hey, your name is too long. Is there some abbreviation you use, or can we just go by your first name, the first word in your first name as opposed to both of them? But you've probably also experienced the flip side of that, where it lets you type it all in and you hit the save button and then you get Latonia Murr. And you're like, okay, well, I wouldn't have typed in the second part of my name if I knew it was going to cut it off there. And if you're really lucky, they haven't thought through CRUD operations on your name. And so you are now forever Latonia Murr because they don't let you update that, which I can't tell you how many times I've shipped out a feature and my boss goes, that's great. How do I delete that mistake that I made? I'm like, damn it, I forgot to include that in the UI. So I go back in and add in a delete button. And then the next message I get is, hey, it's great that deleted, but there was no confirmation message on it and I deleted the wrong thing. Could you get that back for me? Which is always the next part of the UI is you go back in and add in, are you sure you want to delete this?
Okay, so I'm sorry, but did you answer my question about the apostrophe? They all allow for apostrophe?
Depends how it is escaped. So if we were talking about where we dropped Bobby tables, where we drop the messages table, if it is some of them go, I'm too lazy to escape this outright, so I'm just going to ignore anything with an apostrophe in it and remove it, or I'm going to just say it's invalid and make the user take it out themselves. Both bad user experience, if it is escaped properly, like SQLize will escape it, the database has no problem storing things like quotes. It is just a matter of, do we escape it properly going into the database, and then do we unescape it when it comes out of the database, both of which SQLize handles for us. So the TLDR is we won't actually have to do anything special for your name, Latonia, because it isn't 255 characters long. But we could do things like not make the database field big enough, or use a package not like SQLize where we would have to worry about escaping things out like quotes. Because if we didn't, your name could be La Drop Bobby Tables. Okay. Yes, Latonia, that's what I mean by escaping, is adding in that forward slash. I always have to look at the keyboard and make sure that it's leaning in the right direction. But yeah, we use the forward slash to escape out the quote to say, hey, we don't actually mean end my string here. What I actually mean is I want the quote to show up in the database or in the string or whatever it would be. Okay. It is 6:30, so I'm not even going to ask if you guys have any more questions. I want to get to coding. So let's think about, I want to fix my nav bar, which was driving me crazy yesterday. And then we are going to switch over to getting our customers page built out in the front end. Then we are going to pause, switch over to our backend setup, get our database working, and integrate it all together. So I will be super happy if our customers page by the end of the day is fully functional. I'm not making any promises that we'll get there. I'm also not guaranteeing that I won't keep going if we get that done in lightning speed. But the goal is not to overwhelm here. It's just to get the customers page done. And then I will put together a poll for the beginning of next week of how much you want to keep going in the appliance case versus how much you want to go back to the e-commerce site. Because I think the concepts that we would cover in the e-commerce site, we can also cover over here in the appliance case. But I'm going to put that ball in your court on Monday. Or possibly even this weekend and post a poll. So I've got some time to prep. Maybe I'll do that at the break. Anyway, thinking aloud there, let's dive into our code. So I happen to have my code open from yesterday. I'm in module 7, week 2, day 2. Like I said, feel free to pull down the classroom repo and pull out the code that we were at yesterday, but I'm going to fire this up with an npm start. And it's going to yell at me and say it can't find npm start, because if I run ls, I've got my backend and my front end folders here. So I need to change into my appliance front end folder with a cd. And now I should be able to run my npm start. Okay, so I get my lovely login page. If I click login, we're here, but we've got this white space here, and it is going to drive me crazy until we fix it. So I'm going to pop open inspect. And before I start fiddling around, I want to know where that white space is coming from. So I'm going to blow up my console. I'm going to click the little icon up here, which is going to let me select a single element. And I'm going to hover over until I see where that white space is coming from. So because it's there, I'm going to click on it. And it's telling me it's on my col3 that I'm using. So that's coming from the grid system, not from the container, which is where I thought it might have been coming from. But my container is all the way up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over my col3, and I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and I've got some padding going on here. So I want to confirm that that's actually the case. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to set my padding to 0. And now what did that do? That fixed my issue where I had some white space over on the side. Okay, that's good, but there's white space still up here at the top. So before we get too far, I'm going to go back to my code. I'm going to go find where I've got my col3, which happens to be in my customers. And I'm going to target my style and say the padding left should be 0. Now I'm going to go back in here, realizing there are Slack messages that I am ignoring. Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to refresh the page, and now you notice my spacing on the left is gone, which is good. Now I want to figure out where that stuff at the top is coming from. So I'm going to kind of hover over different components until I see, you notice I'm hovering over there and I'm like, that's too generic. It's not showing me where that's coming from. I'm going to keep hovering over different components until, oh, that's that orange color, or maybe it's green. That's the component I want to target. So I'm going to click on that, and that's telling me that this is coming from inside my column where I've got a margin top 10px. And so we know that it's a margin because it is orange. And if I hover over this here, the orange is going to show me where my margin is coming from. So if I go in here and set that to 0, now I got rid of that space. So that's good. I'm going to come back into my VS Code. I'm going to go to my sidebar. I'm going to find my margin top 10 and kill it. So now I'm in here and I'm like, refresh. All right, that's looking good, but those buttons are just right up on the edge. So I'm going to go back into my code, and here's my UL, and I've got it all in a div. So I should be able to just add a padding of, let's say, 15 on that and pop back over here. And now I've got all of those showing up. Now I could come in with my styling and maybe separate these out. Maybe I want the text to be centered. Maybe I don't want them to show up as a group. Maybe I want to change the components around there. For now, this looks all right to me. We're going to run with this. But if you wanted to change this to all separate buttons, or if you said screw max, I think all of these would look better up in the nav bar. That's completely fine to do as well. There is a lot of design that is just subjective. And so it is okay to say, I want to do this differently. I want to use a different component, whatever it's going to be. I'm going to stop there and see if anyone has questions. And then we're going to start building out our components page. Let me launch the poll. And then I will share the two files that I edited, which are sidebar.js and my customers.js. And not the end of the world if you're not following along. These are just styling tweaks. Hopefully we get it looking like this, but not the end of the world. If you don't, it will still be functional otherwise.
Mine does not look like that, and it is the code that I borrowed from you. Can I show you or wait?
Yep.
Or
Go for it.
I just don't want to disrupt anybody. All right. Let's see. Where'd you go? All right. Get you guys out of the way. Move this. You can see what I've got. And I just went into the Git to make sure I had, just in case.
So click
try to-
log in there.
Pardon?
Click login.
Oh. Doll. Sorry. Oh, now it's customers, so I need to.
Pop open your head tag for me. Left click on head. On the little arrow next to head.
Oh, up here.
No, where it says the word head, there is an arrow to
Oh,
the left.
excuse
of
me.
it.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry.
And pop open the first style tag.
This guy?
The first style tag, the tag that actually says style.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And pop open the second one. So the problem is you do not have Bootstrap included, which is why you're not getting any of the styling from the grid.
But it would be included from your code.
That was in the index.html file in the public folder in my code.
Okay, and maybe, okay, and that's all I need to do is that, and it should be good. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Hey, Max, are there certain files that we're gonna like be in, or should I just anticipate going in between all of them? I'm just trying to.
We're going to focus primarily in the customers page. And that should be the only one that we are going to be in today. At least in the front end. We will be doing backend setup, but that will probably be in another window. Ooh, Kyle, I like the ambition on the Cyrillic character. We can definitely do that. Let me go back to sharing my screen. So if we go to our nav bar and change out our R for this funky looking thing, this ampersand pound sign is saying, hey, there's an HTML character coming. So and then this 1701 is the actual code of the character. So if we save that and look over here, we'll see our R actually reversed direction. Now you do want to be careful about using those extensively. They're actually, if you like are scrolling through Twitter and you notice someone has their name, like their username styled differently, that is using those HTML style codes. The reason you need to be careful is because screen readers, for accessibility reasons, will actually not pronounce that appliances are us. They will pronounce that as appliances, Cyrillic character with an R facing the opposite direction, us. And so you do want to be careful there. I don't know if there's a way you can cheat and use those tags and then use a basic like like another HTML tag to basically tell the screen reader like pronounce this as the letter R. That may be in the area, the ARIA accessibility features. But for this, I'm not too worried about accessibility. So I'm going to roll with it because I think it looks great. And I did have that thought and I went, no, I'm going to be digging around too much trying to find that character code. So thank you for sharing that. All right, we've got 8 votes in. Going to give you guys one more second and then we will keep going.
Should work.
All right, I'm not hearing any questions and I just got my 9th vote in. So I'm going to keep going here. And the good news is I'm only going to be road runnering through getting our dummy data in, and then I will stop. We'll actually take 3 breaks coming up. We're going to get our customer table showing up, take a break. We're going to get our customer form showing up, take a break, and then we are going to get all of our back end setup done. And that will include our models. And then if we're feeling really ambitious, we're going to get our front end talking to our back end. So just to give you an idea of where the breaks are coming up, and I do realize that we are only 15 minutes away from 7 o'clock. So one of those breaks is going to be a full 15-20 minute break. Any questions before we dive into that? Okay, so I am going to hop back to my front end, and my front end has this lovely customers table with some data showing up. So I'm going to go to my customers file. Actually going to close everything else out. And in my customers, I have my sidebar. I'm going to do a div class name equals col-9. And then in here, I'm going to do maybe an H3 that has a style with a text decoration of underline and a underline and a font weight of 700, which is bold. And then in here, I can just throw in a customers. And I'm going to go back to my code. And now I've got my customers showing up. Let's pretty that up a little bit more. Put that in a div with a style of text align center. I'm pretty sure Bootstrap actually has their own text-center class. But either way, we can use them. They're going to achieve the same thing. So now I've got my customers up in the center. That looks good. Let's get a table going. So I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. And by the way, I am not just showing you these docs to show you where you would get them from. I can tell you off the top of my head, other than the grid system, I do not have Bootstrap memorized, right? Part of your day job as even a senior developer is going to be going to the documentation, finding code snippets and using them. So I don't want you guys to think that, oh, he magically has everything in his head. There are definitely things we want to do in the documentation. All right, so here's like a pretty basic example, and that kind of looks all right, but I want to keep scrolling here. Ooh, those striped rows look nice. All right, what else do we have here? Ooh, little hover on the row. I like that too. All right, we have anything else? Active tables, not too thrilled about. Table borders, we could come back in. Oh, we got small tables and vertical alignment. All right, I've scrolled through enough. I'm going to start with this hoverable rows because I kind of like how all of that is showing up, and I'd like my service orders to be the same. So I'm going to actually come up to the first complete example, which is up here where it's got all of my data showing up. So I'm going to grab that whole thing. I'm going to dump that in under my outside of my text align center div because I don't want all the text to be centered. And then I'm going to use my find and replace that I happen to have open to replace all my classes with a class name. So I'm going to save. It's going to do my indentation for me. I'm going to come over here. And when you look at that, we've got a table already. All right. Last thing I want to do is I did like that hover effect. And I did like the striped rows as well. So I'm going to come up here, find my table. And in my table, I'm going to add a table dash striped 1p 1p. And I'm going to come down here and I'm also going to find my hover, and that has to go on the table body. Let me see, the striped just has to go on the table itself. Okay, so table hover on a T body. So I'm going to find my T body. I'm going to add a class name to that with my table hover. And now when I save and come over here, I get nothing. The stripe is working, my hover is not. I'm wondering if that has to do with something in my JavaScript within the T body. I read that wrong. I thought that was a little weird. It does go up here on the table itself to make it happen in the T body. It doesn't go on the T body itself. Misread that documentation. Okay, come back over here. Save, refresh. And we're still not getting our hover because I forgot a space like an idiot. Okay, and now we got our little hover effect going on. Okay, so let's go back to our wireframe. We've got first name, last name, phone number, and address, and then an empty cell to get our edit and our delete showing up. So we are going to say first name, last name, phone, address, and then just th scope equals call, and just leave that blank for our edit and delete to show up. Save, come back over here, and that's already working. You notice this is empty because we don't have any cells in it yet, but we'll fix that in a second. Okay, we are going to keep rolling. I would like to get my dummy data to show up here. So I'm going to delete out this and say td testy and td mctesterson. Then a TD for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. A TD, and you know what? I'm not being my most efficient self. No reason why we can't copy and paste some of this over. And I'm going to grab all of that and dump it down here and delete out my last table row. Save, come back to my React app. That's all showing up. Now I'm going to try and get clever here. The web is using more and more emojis and supporting them natively. So we could go out and use an icon set like the material icon library, which is one Google supports, or a very popular one called Font Awesome. I'm not sure if we guys have covered that, but I'm going to try and get clever here. And this could blow up in my face. But what happens if we do a TD for our table cell and try and use an emoji? So what if I do like a pencil? Oh, that one looks kind of cool. And then in here, I'll do our curly braces and 2 spaces just to really enforce that that space is coming through. It's a little React trick. And then what if we try and find a trash can and throw that in? Oh, not terrible. Let me switch this to the actual emoji pencil. I don't know. I think we can live with that. Let me see. Can I get a couple more spaces in there, or are you going to throw a fit? No, you don't want to show those spaces. All right, we'll go old school. Let's do an NBSP. which is a non-breaking space character. Throw 3 of them in there, and that got them spread out a little bit more. Little hacky, but for not bringing in an entire font icon library or package, I kind of don't hate it. One thing I do want is let's get those centered up at the top. So I'm going to go back up to my table, and in my table head, I think I should be able to do a style equals text align center. Okay, that moved them over. I'm liking that. And I don't know, you guys want a border on that? Kind of feels like a border would complete it. So let's go up here and do a style border 1px solid black. I can dig it. Can you dig it? Let's go back to our wireframe. Looks pretty similar. We've got lines in between, but you know what? I kind of like the hover. I like it striped. If it were a mock-up, then I would go, yeah, the mock-up's got the table lines. We should add the table lines. But because we're on that wireframe line, it's okay to get in your code and go, no, I kind of like it looking like this. So I'm just going to borrow our icon edit, throw that down here, make sure it shows up over here, call that a win and move on. Carolyn, question.
Yeah, so for the striped, if we had more than 2 rows, what would happen is the third one would be that darker color, then light, then dark, then light, but then it moves with the mouse also.
Yeah, so the striped is doing it without any
There we
hovering.
go.
And then the
Yep.
hovering effect is what is making it striped and changing it a little bit
Yep.
more.
Yep, so that's how they do that. Like the old computer paper that had green line, then white line, green those days. Cool, thanks.
All right. I did say we were going to take a break after this, but I'm feeling ambitious because that was way too easy. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to get our form working. Then I will take a break. And then when we come back, save any questions and working on this and trying to get it working when we come back. So everyone can actually get at least a 15-minute break in. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep all of this in one component. So I am going to just collapse out some of the things we're already done working on and just pick it up from right here. So I use the arrows over on the left to say I'm done working on those, just collapse it out for me. So I'm going to do another div style equals my text align center. And in here, I may use an H4, which has a style of text decoration underline and a font weight of 700 as well, because I would like that to be bold. And I will say, we'll just say add a customer for now. Maybe we get fancy down the road and or we can, no, let's leave it as add for now. Okay, so I come over here, I got my add a customer showing up. It's a little bit smaller than my customers, which I used a H3 up in this div. And so that's probably what we want it to be, just a little bit smaller. Of course, you could always set the font size in here to something smaller or even drop this to an H5 if you wanted to. But it does make sense to think through your H whatever hierarchy. I kind of like it underlined there, especially once we add the form. But maybe if we take our font weight off, let's see if that makes it. Yeah, that makes it a little smaller. Let's roll with that. Okay, so I'm going to come down here. I'm going to do another div, and I'm looking at this and going, oh boy, that's a lot of columns and rows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. Carolyn, you're welcome to style yours however you want. I'm kind of happy with where this is at, but you're welcome to change it up. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to start with a row, and that row is going to have a col. And if we don't specify what the size of the col is, this is a newer feature in Bootstrap 4. It will automatically make the columns the same width across all of them. So we don't actually have to specify a number if we want the columns to be equal width. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to look for my input in my documentation. And they've got all kinds of examples in here. But I kind of, maybe I'll be proven wrong. Do they still use labels? Go back up to the overview, maybe form control. That's what I wanted. Okay, so over here in our mockup or our wireframe, we use placeholder text. But what happens when we start typing in those inputs? That placeholder text is going to disappear. So maybe it's better not to make it placeholder text like our wireframe said, and instead make it a separate label that shows up there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this code and I'm going to throw that in my column and hit save, and it throws a fit. But if we remember last night, it was because this input tag isn't being closed. So I'm going to save that there. I'm going to come back into my React app, and now my email address is showing up. But that shouldn't really be email address, right? That should say first name. And then it is saying 4, and the 4 always has to match the ID down here. So we'll call this first name, and it's for first name. And then the type, we are going to not make it email. We're just going to make it text. Or we could just take that out completely. I am going to replace all of my class equals with my class name equals. And then we'll just remove out the placeholder. Take a look. There's my first name. Now that's huge, but we're going to solve that in a second, right? Because if we look at where our column ends, that is ending with this div here. So I'm going to do a new div class name equals col. Borrow this whole thing and drop it in. And then this, if we look at our wireframe, it's going to be address 1. I'm going to say address 1. I'm going to say address 1. And then I'm going to change the label to say address 1. Take a peek. Oh, got a form rocking and rolling. That's exactly what I wanted it to be. And if I click over here, oh, that looks pretty good. All right, let's get a little overconfident here. Let's take this whole row, paste it. Oh, let me make sure I'm pasting in the right spot. I'm going to follow my row down here. So it is this line. So it's going to be down here. Paste all of that. And before I make any changes, I'm going to come over here and go, well, it's actually kind of what I wanted. Noticing I missed a colon on my first name. So let me throw that in. And now, because we've wireframed all of this out, it's not a problem for us to think left to right because we've already pre-planned where all of these fields are going to go. So now I know that I've got last name and address too. So I'm just going to go in and do that. Last name, last name, last name. And I'm going to say address 2, address 2, address 2. Save, come back over. Last name, address 2 showing up. All right, all of that's really good. Let's keep it going. You know, I'm realizing that all of this should probably be in a form. And so we're going to figure out where our form starts, which is right about here. Just drop that in there. We can figure out where our form ends based off of, that's one row, that's our other row. So we want to put our closing form tag in there. Okay, we're going to keep going based off the wireframe. My wireframe has phone number. Ooh, city, state. That's getting interesting there. All right, there are 2 ways we could approach this. We could either make this a col 6, this a col 3, and this a col 3. Or we could make this a col 6, this whole thing a col 6, and then do another row inside of this and do 2 col 3s inside. doesn't really matter either way. I'm going to do it as a 3 and a 3 and make this a 6. But if you wanted to make this a 6 and then make another row inside of it and do a 6 and a 6 in front of there, in there, you could also do that. So I'm going to grab my entire row here, paste it in. This one is going to be phone number. This one is going to be phone number. I'm going to change this to phone number. We are going to leave this as a typed text because if someone types in parentheses or a dash or a space, we want to support that. We don't want to force the user into typing in a phone number a certain way. And then down here, actually up here, I'm going to say call 6. I'm going to make this a call 3. Then I'm going to grab this whole thing and paste it in. Okay, so this one is going to be city. And then this one is going to be state and state and state. City, 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 state, state, state. I'm going to save that. I'm going to come over here and all right. All of that's looking pretty good. But you know what? States should be limited, right? There are only 50 states and then a couple extras. Let's just say we're going to support the 50 states. What if I just do a Google search for list of states? And let's see if this is going to be formatted in a way. I'm going to try and copy all of these. And what happens if I come in here and instead of an input type text, I'm actually going to delete all of that. And I'm going to make it a select. And I'm just going to paste the states in. Okay, well, they all pasted in, but all of those need to be options. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to get fancy with my find and replace that we talked about. And I'm going to say, hey, only look in the find only in the text that we have selected. So I'm only going to look at things that we have selected. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to find any \n, which is a new line, a new character return. And I'm going to replace that with our closing option tag, a \n, and then our opening option tag. And if all goes well and we turn on regular expression, when I hit replace, boom, we've dropped in all of our options. So now we just need to take care of the opening option tag and the very last option tag and close that out and hit save. Come over to our React app. And now we've got this nice little drop down, but oh man, is that ugly? And is it just causing me to scroll? Don't like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up here. I'm just going to add a class name equal to form control. Where do I get form control from? Well, that's where all of our other inputs have used as well. So I'm going to save that. I pop back over here. Now I get this nice little drop down. I can click in and pick my value and I'm good to go. Would really like that to be state abbreviation, but we'll let that slide for now. Okay, last thing we need to do, well, almost last thing, we need our zip code down here, and then we need our add save customer button. So I'm going to come down to where we're doing all of our rows, and I'm going to do a div class name equals row. I'm going to make a div class name with a col 9, and nothing's going to go in that col 9. And then we're going to do another div class name, which is just going to be a col. Illinois and Nebraska. Oh, there are a couple of them. No one lives in these states anyway. It's not like it really matters. Sarcasm for anyone who is starting to watch these videos and is starting 3/4 of the way into the program for some reason and doesn't know that sarcasm is my middle name. All right, I think that should be all of them. If there's another one I'm missing, feel free to throw it out and I will fix it. Okay. So in here, I'm going to take my entire form input here. Drop it in here, make this my zip code. Make this zip code. This I'm actually going to make a number. No, I'm not. I'm going to leave it as a text because if we have a zip code starting with a 0, we don't want it to truncate the 0 at the beginning of it. And we will make this zip code. Come back over here. Got our form rocking and rolling. It's doing everything that I want. I'm going to just drop down, do one last div class name equals row. And I'm going to go back to Bootstrap. I'm going to search for my button. I'm going to grab my primary button. I'm going to do a div class name equals a col and a text dash center. And drop in my button. Close out my div unless I already had it closed. No, you're being cranky with me. You need a closing div. Okay. I'm going to rename that to what is in my mockup, which is add customer. And I'm going to throw type submit onto my button. Come back over here. There's my add a customer button. Works for me. I think this is doing everything I want. That state's bothering me a little bit. I think I cheated and used the wrong class on a select. I shouldn't have used form dash control. I should have used form dash select. So I'm going to replace that on my select all the way up here. And when I come over here, now I've got my little arrow showing up that's showing me it's a drop down. That's what was bothering me. I'm like, how do we know that's a drop down? So we just add that arrow on there. All right, that will do it for me. There's our customers page. Is it pretty? Nah, not really. Is it hideous? No, not hideous either. Is it functional? I think it will do what we need it to, and it looks pretty similar to our wireframe. And I'm only 10 minutes over our break. All right, I'm going to share this code in Slack. I am not asking for you to work on it during the break. We will take time after the break to cover all of this, but we'll take a break until, give you a 20-minute break. We'll regroup at 7:30, and then at 7:30, we can go through this and I will answer any questions you guys have.
So no questions now, Max? Take a
No
break.
questions now. Save them
Okay.
until 7:30. I am back if anyone has questions, if you got it working or are just following along, just listening along, I mean, go ahead and vote in the poll. Otherwise, just go ahead and work on catching up, and I will wait for more poll responses.
Hey, Max.
Yellow.
So I had a question, like it looked like it just took you mere seconds to do stuff that would be considered user experience, just that little something extra. And I was just curious, I mean, it must scale, I guess, if you're working on a huge project, but yeah, I was just curious if it's worth trying to put the effort into doing those extra things, or if once you get on a really big project, you just really don't have, the time, unless that's specifically your role, you just don't have the time for that.
It really depends on, yes, deadlines matter. Sometimes you will be hired by someone who has no idea that a full stack developer is doing six different developers' jobs in one, right? And so user experience should never be up to the developer. There should be someone who has more of an artsy background, who has, and I don't mean that derogatively, I mean like actually has training in design, understands those principles, those fundamentals. The same goes for database design, that goes for front-end development, that goes for back-end development, that goes for deploying all of this in server ops or DevOps. There's a lot that goes into a full stack developer, right? So there are times where I go, that arrow is really going to bug me. And because that arrow isn't there, they are not going to know it's a drop down. If that's a 5-minute fix for me, I want to fix it. But if I know that that's going to take me 2 hours to fix, now I'm going to draw that line and go, okay, that user experience isn't worth it, right? So there are definitely times that I get handed a design where I'm like, this is beautiful. I love it. It's going to take me 8 hours to build this, and it would take me an hour to build it if we just use this alternative. And I'll push back on that, and the design person will be like, oh yeah, either way, it's going to have the same user experience. And so they'll switch it out for me in the mockups, and then I can build that out instead. So it is a tough threshold, and something that you can only really get with experience of being able to say, hey, this is worth it. I want to, tweak this or play with the styling. Or if you go, you know what, this is good enough, let's roll with it. And you also learn things like, hey, using a column 9 and then putting nothing in it is a little hacky, but man, did it get that job of getting that zip code over on the right, and it looks exactly where I want it to be, right? So it is you don't want to look at your code and ever be like, ooh, I wouldn't want to come back to this code. But at the same time, if it's functional and if it accomplishes it, those are all factors in trying to determine whether you want to spend more time on that section or not. And if it makes you feel any better, the speed that I went tonight is the speed that I would go at work if I weren't teaching this, right? Like that is pretty much top speed. I don't know many developers who can go faster than that. I'm sure there are, and I'm sure there are a lot of front end developers who could go that speed, but are silently crying on the inside that I didn't go back and style it more or fix additional padding or use some other component that I should be using. But that's the beauty of the full stack, is blending all of those skills together and knowing at what point what's the perfect is the enemy of completion, or something along those lines, right? Of yes, we could easily spend the next hour in class just styling that one page, or we could do our backend setup, get our database set up, and actually make an endpoint that is showing the data on the front end and doing all of that. And it's like, all right, for an hour, I would rather have all of that up and running than go back in and doing some styling tweaks. But there are definitely some days at work where I go, brain is shot, no new code is coming out. I'm just going to open my front end and make the front end a little prettier. Or I'm going to see what feature requests are out there and see if there are any low-hanging fruit, so to speak, of the easy stuff that we can just pick off. Got 5 poll responses in, which makes me think that you guys are either still working or still on break. So we will give you guys a couple minutes to see how we're doing in the poll.
Max, could I ask a quick question about restarting my React?
Shoot, sure.
I was following along yesterday, and at the end of the day, it was working fine when I closed out of the terminal and everything, and it won't start up today, and it can't connect to it can't find the package JSON file. It says no such file or directory.
Can you run an LS and a PWD and see if you are where you think you are?
Oh, it duplicated my appliance front end. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, you got to be careful with Create React App because Create React App creates the new folder for you. But when we do our npm init, the npm init is going to happen in whatever folder we run it in. It's not going to create the new folder. And so there's definitely inconsistencies in whether it creates a new folder and dumps everything in there, or whether it just happens in whatever folder you're working in. So you've got to be really careful of where you do that Create React App, because it will make that new folder for you. And Karen mentioned that at her job, she would spend hours trying to get one little piece to look right. I've got bad news for you. At my job as a senior developer, I will spend hours and hours to get a little piece to look right. There are some people that I call a front end wizard. I also think they are masochists for liking CSS as much as they do. I cannot stand CSS. I recognize CSS as a necessary evil, and I use CSS to get the job done and move on. There are some people who like enjoy writing CSS and love doing media queries and adding different styling and figuring out more efficient ways of writing it. And I am just not one of those people. But there are times where I go, that will drive me crazy. And that was one of them with the sidebar where I'm like, that gray is going to get to the edge of the screen, and I don't care what it's going to take for me to do it. I don't care how messy the CSS is. That sidebar gray is going to make it to the edge of the screen. And sure enough, it did.
How did you get the drop-down menu to choose the emojis?
You mean in the edit and delete buttons?
Yeah, and VS Code.
Control Command Space.
Okay, thanks.
You can also copy and paste them in, but Control Command Space is a Mac level, like it will work. It should work in any application to pull up the emoji picker.
Yeah, I'm actually using your code so that I can participate in the back end part of it, but it's coming in, like, it came in as, it's just saying pencil 2. It's not, so I don't have that one, I guess, so.
If you save it and go over to React and in the browser, see if it shows up.
That's what I mean. It's showing up in the browser as pencil 2.
So either you don't have it and your hypothesis is correct, or something broke in the copy paste. Yeah. No, if you go over to the Slack channel and look at that line of code in the code itself, it actually says pencil 2 instead of the little emoji symbol. Slack really screwed me over there. I will fix that if I can find it. My God. Here it is. So it wasn't your computer didn't have it. It's that Slack really wanted to mess with me. Slack stores emojis under the hood a little differently. Okay, now you should be able to copy and paste them and it should hold this time. No, it changed back to pencil 2 on me. Pain in my butt. Yeah, if you highlight pencil 2 and the colons on either side of them in VS Code, delete it, and then use Command Space and put in the pencil symbol, that should fix it in your code.
So just Command Space? I thought there was another key you said before.
Control Command Space.
Okay, thank you.
That is the first time I think Slack has screwed me over, especially in a code block. Normally, Slack is very forgiving with what I want to put in. I might actually open a bug with them. Interesting.
But then you do something else, Max, because I have a pencil, this tiny little itty bitty thing, and I thought you went through and like found the right one. Or am I thinking of stickies from yesterday?
No. I used the pencil emoji instead of the pencil that looks like black and white, and that's what set the size right. So the one I picked was
Latonia, it looks small in VS Code, but it looks big when you go in the browser.
Good
Okay,
feedback.
thank you. And I'm trying to find a trash can. Shouldn't my emojis be the same as yours? I've been through this list like 2 or 3 times already.
They should be. Where's my table? My table here. Yeah, if I did Control Command Space, I just did a search for trash, and that's the first thing that popped up. And I just double clicked on that, and that dropped it in for me. Totally cheating here because getting icons working in the browser. I realized I'm not sharing my screen when I shared that. Sorry.
We should use a recycle bin instead of a trash can. I'm only kidding.
Yeah, if you type in trash, all the emojis actually have a name. And if you hover over it, it will say waste basket, which is the official name of it, but they also have an alias. So when you type in trash, it will show up.
Yep. But I remember when computers switched over to being politically correct, it wasn't the trash anymore. It was the recycle bin. I guess we're back to trash on the Mac.
Well, on the Mac, it has always been trash. On the PC, it's been recycle bin.
Yeah, exactly. So just a little humor there. Very little.
Latonia, if you want for the trash can, that one Slack didn't screw me over on, so you can copy and paste that right out of Slack and paste it into your code.
Okay, because I was just looking at a bucket or a toilet. Like those were the options I had.
I think they also have like a red X or a do not enter sign. You could grab any of those. No, for the Shul, you asked, do you need an extension? For the emojis, you shouldn't need one. It should just natively work. But like I said, we are kind of cheating and using emojis there instead of using a font library like Font Awesome that allows you to use different icons. So yeah, we're cheating, but we're cutting edge anyway, right? So we're fine to use those emoji.
Okay, and this will be the last question I need, I'm sure. Did you do a reverse to get your pencil to go the right way?
I did not. I just used the
Oh.
default one.
You just left it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'm sure we could do a flip or target that in the CSS, or I'm sure we could get fancy. We could also go find regular images of a pencil and not get super technical and pull in a font library and just use a regular pencil that we find. I'm just cheating on the emoji. I don't know. I can't say that I've ever used an emoji in a production app. Like, I've never built that in. There are some scaling concerns and some licensing concerns, and the pencil may look different on the Mac than it looks on Windows. And so it is definitely better to use an image or a vector or some font library to make icons work. Bootstrap may even have their own icon library that they support. So that's normally a decision you make earlier on in your project of what icons am I going to support and which ones am I going to reuse. But I like cheating, so we're gonna just cheat and use emoji. I've got 7 votes in on the poll. I'm just waiting for one more, and then we will keep going. Not hearing any questions, so I think you guys are just working. But if you do have any questions or you're getting an error message somewhere that you want some help with, feel free to come off mute or throw it in the chat. Everyone, one more minute. If I don't get any poll responses, we will keep going. All right, Susan, you are pushing us over the edge, so we will keep going. The NBSP stands for non-breaking space. Don't ask me why it's SP. It basically means non-breaking means a line break would be a breaking space. So when you hit the enter or return button, that would be a breaking space. So the NBSP stands for non-breaking space. The reason why we have to do that is HTML does not like 2 spaces right next to each other. It is a weird quirk of HTML where if you try and get 2 or 3 spaces next to each other, it's going to show it all as one space. So we can kind of force it into getting those spaces to show up by using multiple NBSPs next to each other. Like I said, hacky, not ideal. We should probably put a span tag on both of those emojis and use either margin or padding to get them to spread apart. But you're seeing the tricks of the trade of sometimes when I want to go that fast, NBSP is a lot faster than throwing a span on it with a margin to separate them out. And I'm sure some front-end developer is sobbing quietly knowing that I am teaching NBSP instead of doing it the right way. But Perks of learning from a real full stack dev. Okay, I'm going to keep going here. We are jumping ship on the front end. I am hopeful that we will be able to get back to this tonight, but that might be a little ambitious. So what I'm going to do is I actually have my backend folder open in my VS Code. If you like working in two separate windows and you want your backend separate from your front end code, that's fine. I'm going to try and run with it all in the same window. But like I said, however you'd like to set it up, if you want to open your backend folder in a different window, that's fine. If you don't have a backend folder created yet, you should create that. I am going to right click on this and open in the integrated terminal, which is going to dump me out down here. Going to PWD to make sure I am where I think I am. And then I am going to run a lovely npm init-y. That is going to get my package.json started for me. And I'm going to npm i-s express body parser cores equalize and pg. Yes, that's a lot. So before you can even ask, I will paste it into the pasted code channel. If I can find it in Slack, where did you go on me? I just had you open. Okay. That should have installed a bunch of stuff for me. So I'm going to right click and create a new file in my appliance backend called server.js. I'm going to get my server started by requiring express and throwing the parentheses at the end to say actually start a server out of that. I'm going to tell my server to use this lovely package called body parser and expect it to have some JSON. I'm also going to tell my server to use this lovely package called cores to open that up. And I'm going to tell my server to listen on 3001, not 30,000. And that is going to do a console.log. Server is running on 3001. And I am going to come back up and do my server.get and my default route and say my rec and my res and res.send my hello world. Fast? What are you talking about fast? That wasn't fast. I'm gonna start my server with a npx nodemon server.js. It's telling me it needs to install nodemon, which I will tell it it can do. It starts up on 3001. It's gonna pop over to my browser, make sure it is actually running. I get my hello world back, and we take a break and pause and share some code. I should launch that poll too to know how you guys are doing.
Excuse me, Max, I'm sorry. You said something about either having the front end and back end in the same window or not, and I didn't catch what you said.
Yeah, I'm working I have my day 2 folder open.
Yeah.
And in that I've got both my front end and my back end. So I'm just working in the same VS Code window. If you
good.
wanted to, you could just do a file new window and then go up to File, Open, and pop open the backend folder right from here. So you could have
Yeah.
them in 2 separate windows if you wanted to.
Okay, because I was trying to do that. It wasn't happy because I've got module 7 week 2. I've got the whole thing in there just so. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry to be a pest. Do we stop the other terminal, the other server?
No, we should have them both running at the same time.
So when we open integrated terminal, it's gonna like double up or something?
Yeah, over on the right, you see it says node over here. If we click on node, it's actually going to switch us back to our other terminal. And if I click down here, it's going to pop us over to the second one. So these are like
Okay.
tabs open in the terminal.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Got 5 votes in on the poll. We are shooting for 7. Well, that was quick. We are at 7. So I'm going to give everyone a minute just in case, and then we will keep going. I know I went super fast there. I'm glad you guys are catching up. If I am going fast and I type something that you're like, I've got no idea what that's doing. I understand that it's working. I've got no idea what it's doing. Please, please, please interrupt me and say, I know we've already covered this. I know we've already talked about this. We've used it 5 times. I still don't know what it means. There is absolutely no shame in saying that. So if you have a question, or you can always DM Karen directly, and Karen can ask it on your behalf, and not expose your name as well. So feel free. If I know I'm going fast, hopefully this is just a recap. If it's not a recap, if you still don't know what it's doing, feel free to ask the question or DM it to Karen, and Karen can ask it anonymously on your behalf. Carolyn, question.
Right, after you've installed Express, Sequelize, etc., do we then do npm start?
You have to get your server.js set up first. And then once you get your server.js set up, then you can start the server.
Of course. Thank you.
No problem.
Forget these little things.
Hey, can I just clarify, Matt?
Yep.
So once I got my server set up, I did the npx nodemon server.js. Is that the right one, or should I have done something different? Okay.
Nope, that's it. npx
Okay,
nodemon server.js. You got it. We use npm start because npm start has got create React app has done some voodoo for us so that we can just use that start command. I will go on a little tangent here. We can actually get npm start working in our backend. If we look in our, never in the package lock JSON, in the package.json, you see there's the scripts here. We can actually tell it the way to start is by running npx nodemon server.js. And because we added that script into our package.json, now when we're in the terminal, we can actually run npm start down here, and it will do the right things and run npx nodemon start for us. So that's a little bonus for you. We can basically tell it, hey, when we run npm in any of these commands in here, this is what I actually want you to run. And that's a very common thing to do. And if you're working in any package, chances are they've got some scripts set up for you like npm start. And if you are really curious, you can actually go back to the front end and look, and they've got a scripts with a start, and it's really running React script start for us. And that React script start is coming from create React app. So under the hood, maybe a detour that hopefully doesn't take you too far off the path, but a nice little fun fact of how npm start actually works under the hood. Carolyn, question. Okay. I am lowering your hand for you. Okay. We are good to go. So next step, we want to think about our database. What do we have to do to get the database working before we start writing code? We've got to connect it, but before we can connect to it, we probably got to start it. And then after we start it, we've got to create it. So we're going to pop open Postgres. You're going to get this lovely Postgres with whatever version you have installed. Go ahead and hit start there. And you're going to get a long list of databases down here. That's fine. Don't worry about them. You can go ahead and minimize this. You're going to pop open Beekeeper Studio. We are going to connect into, hopefully you have a recent connection down here. That is your username. We are going to double click on that. That will take us right into our query. And we can run something like create database appliances. I'm feeling so confident we're going to get it right. I'm not even putting a number at the end of it. We are going to hit run. And we see query executed successfully, no results. That is all we need. We can do the rest over in our code. If you want to confirm it is working, you can actually go into back to your Postgres app. And if you scroll through that list, appliances should show up now. If it doesn't, you can hit stop and start again, and it should show up in the list now as a database we just created. Okay, now, Latonia, we have to connect it. But before we can connect it, I guess I should mention that we need to do some setup. So I'm going to come into my appliance backend and make a folder called models. And in my models, I'm going to create my db.js. And we are going to pull in Sequelize from our require Sequelize. Then we are going to say, hey, our DB is going to be from that Sequelize we just said we were using. And it is going to use Postgres. And it's going to connect in using my username at localhost on port 5432, because that is Postgres's default, but it is going to connect to appliances. And oh, let's turn off our logging while we're at it, because we know how annoying it is to have every SQL statement appear in the console. And we want to just connect to the DB. And we know that's going to be asynchronous because anything we do in the database is going to be asynchronous. And we are going to await a db.authenticate just to make sure we made it in, and console log out our DB connected successfully. And then we are going to tell it, hey, actually connect to the database doing that asynchronous thing. And then finally, module.export out our database so we can use it in other files. Okay, that was a lot. I'm going to do one more step. I want to test this, and then we will pause and let you guys catch up. So I'm going to go back to my server DB, my server JS, and all I need to do is pull in this lovely little DB function that is going to require from my models db.js, going to save. I get my DB connected successfully in the terminal, and so I am rocking and rolling. I'm going to grab my db.js. I'm going to dump it in Slack. I'm going to put the one line in Slack as well that I added to my server.js. And I am going to restart the poll. Just take a minute to appreciate how much all of you would be screaming bloody murder if I went this fast 2 weeks ago. Well, you're all probably still screaming bloody murder that I'm going this fast, but hopefully you're feeling a little bit more comfortable with keeping up, and the poll numbers are reflecting that as well. Susan, I don't think you're alone in typing Postgres with 2 S's at the end. And I could never tell you if it's Postgres
Hey Max, I keep getting a crash error. I feel like I have the content in here right, but I wonder if I have my terminals mixed up.
Go ahead and share your screen if you're still stuck. And warning everyone, Zoom just told me that not only am I unstable, but so is my internet connection. So apologies if I break up.
It's
So
before
it's
connect DB is not defined is what I'm getting now.
Yep. So look at line 15 compared to line 10.
15 to 10. Oh, okay. Sorry for.
And that's a double whammy. You're missing the E and the word to.
I am down here.
Yep.
Connect to. Okay, now they're lined up.
It should be.
Thank you.
All right, we've got 8 votes in on the poll. I'll give everyone just a minute to catch up unless we hit 9, and then I will keep going.
I can't remember what the logging false meant.
Yeah, so if we take that out, I'm not sharing my screen. So I just commented my logging false out, and you'll see it has executing select 1 + 1 as result. it will log out every single SQL command it is going to run into our terminal, which is fine when you think about it initially. But now once you start doing that for every select or insert or update, you're like, whoa, I don't want that on for everything. So the logging false just turns off that default behavior of logging everything and says, just don't log anything. There are things you can pass here other than false. If you would like to control the logging behavior, you can actually pass it a function and say like, only log delete queries out in case I need to go back and have an audit log for that. Or there are other things you can set up on the logging, but false is just the way to say, hey, just don't log out everything that you run. All right, I'm going to keep going. What is our next step? Nothing to apologize for, Latonia. Before we get to endpoints, what we got, well, our test DB is working because we've got our DB connected successfully, and that's running the authenticate command. So we actually tested the database and made sure that we punched through to the database. The rest of the packages, we're actually using all of them, because if you look at our server.js, we've got body parser and cores already in. We're using Sequelize in our db.js, and then Postgres is used by Sequelize under the hood to make the connection. So we've got all the packages in. We created the database already in BeekeeperML because otherwise we wouldn't be able to connect to appliances here. So yes, we would normally have to do that, but we should have already done that step if we're that far into it. Before we get to the CRUD, what are we doing CRUD on? The data on a table, and those tables we represent in Sequelize as, not as a row. How do we tell Sequelize what to expect the table to be like? No, select is what we use to pull the data out of. That object has to know what structure it's using. We are going to put those columns in something. We created the folder already called this thing. What folder did we create? You guys are all throwing out the keywords, the models, there we go. All right. We created db.js in the models folder, but we need to create our first model. We need to tell the database, hey, we need to tell Sequelize, hey, this table that we want created, here is going to be the structure of all of it. So we are going to create our very first model called customer.js. Okay, our customer.js is going to need to know about these things called data types. Before I wrote out the words data types, this time I'm going to abbreviate and just call it DT. And I'm going to say require from the Sequelize package the data types that you already know about. Then we are going to say module.exports, and that is going to take in our database. So we get access to our database from our db.js file, which we'll do in a second. And we are going to return our db.define. So we're defining the model. We're telling our database what the model should expect. We're going to give it our table name, which is going to be customer. And then it's going to take something called customer ID, which is going to be a type of our, hold on, I got ahead of myself with my curly braces. Close that out there. Okay, save. All right, our type is going to be a data type of an integer, and it's going to be a primary key. Oh, and it is going to auto increment. All right, we've got our customer ID, but gee whiz, wouldn't it be great if we had already planned all of this information out and could just load that information in from somewhere? Oh, well, if we go back over to our diagrams and pop open an existing diagram, we can find in module 8, week 2, day ERD, in our ERD, we've got this lovely table called customers that has customer ID and it happens to be an integer. Oh man, wouldn't it be cool if we just ripped through all of these and added them in pretty quickly? Well, let's see, let's drag this over so I can see them all on my screen. First name, that seems like it's going to be a data type of a string. Last name, that also seems like it's going to be a data type of a string. Phone number, let's also make that a string. Our address 1, let's also make that a string. Our address 2, let's make that a string. Our city, keeping the party going. Our state, let's make that a data type string, and I'll get fancy and even tell it that that's going to be a 2-letter string. So we're getting a little fancy there and specifying that. And then our zip code, let's make that a data type of a string as well, and we'll make that a 5. Holy moly, we're going fast, but we need to prove that all of this is working. So I'm going to save all of this. I'm going to go back to my database and I'm going to tell it, hey, we need to require our customer file and give it access to the database. And I'm actually going to do that after we connect to the database for the first time. Okay, says it's all in there. We need one more thing in our database.js. We want to tell it, actually, I take it back. I'm going to move my customer back up here because we've got to tell it load in the file. And once you've got your model loaded in, just sync over the database for us. And that sync, remember, is what's creating that table in the database for the first time. I'm going to save. I'm going to go back to Beekeeper Studio. I'm going to select my connection type as Postgres, and I'm going to tell it the default database I want to connect to is my appliances database. I'm going to hit connect, and I've got a customers table in there with some beautiful information for me using all of the data from my columns. Now, I know this would be a logical breaking point to let you guys catch up, but I really want to get my 2 endpoints created. So I'm just going to push a little further, get my endpoint working, and then we'll call it a day. So I am going to go to my server.js, and I'm going to actually, I need to pass through my customer. So I'm going to say const customer is equal to my require and give me access to my customer through my database file. So when I go over to my server.js, now for my database, I can pull over my customer and say server.get customer. It's going to be an async rec res. And from here, I am going to res.send my customers, which is going to await my customer.find all. And then I am going to do a server.post to my customer and make it an async rec res. And that is going to await my customer.create anything that is in my rec.body and res.send all my customers back when it's done. How do you know when you're going too fast? Well, it depends if your code runs or not. Moment of truth, and then we will take a break. I'm gonna pop open Postman. I am on 3001. I'm gonna send some code up to my customer endpoint. She's gonna do a post in the body that's using raw JSON. What's it gonna create? It's going to create a first name of Testy and a last name of McTesterson. It's going to have a phone number of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. It's going to have an address 1 of 1, 2. Ooh, forgot the quotes. We're using JSON. Address 1 of 1, 2, 3 Main Street. And an address 2 of apartment 456. Wrap this onto different lines so we can see it all at the same time. It's going to be a city of Syracuse and a state of New York. And the zip code is going to be 13212, 13202. I think it's downtown. Okay, all of that's in there. Gonna send. And I get my customers back and everything looks good there. If I go back to my beekeeper, I can select star from customers and run it. I've got all my data in there. And if I come back over to here and I get and send, I've got all my customer data. Okay. Can hear the streaming going on now. We will stop, let you guys catch up. Code is shared in Slack. Poll is launched, although I don't expect to get any further tonight, and that is okay. If we do hit 8 votes in the poll, we could tempt fate and get this data showing up in our table in the front end. Just throwing that option out there. But more important that you understand the code that we have already covered. Next week is a new week. Yes, Carolyn, there's no way to run our background other than Node. We just are using Node Mon to access Node. The question there was, should our backend be running in Node? That's normally due to a error in one of your files. You should read where the fatal is, because there's probably more information in that error that's going to point you in the direction of why you're getting a fatal.
Excuse me, Matt.
Yes.
I'm getting a const DB. It's saying that DB is already defined.
Go ahead and share your screen. Before I dive into that, I am seconds away from posting the homework assignment for this weekend. I believe there are only 2 homework assignments. One is going to be to wireframe out your front end, the first 3 screens that we wireframed out plus login, so 4 screens. That's the first homework assignment. The second homework assignment will be getting to the point that we are at this very moment. So I am going to post that as soon as it is done copying the files. I was hoping to have it done by 8:30. But that will be the homework assignment. If you're caught up here, good news, you've got one of them done. You just need to go back and do your wireframing. So I will get that posted momentarily. And then we will be good to go starting next week, coming back into this and wrapping that up. Give me 1 second, Latonia, and then I'll loop back to you. "30-second feedback form is coming your way unless Karen beats me to it." If you are feeling verbose, you can also fill out the weekly feedback form, which I'm now making Karen to scramble to grab that one as well. But either or is fine. If you've been filling out the 30-second feedback form all week, feel free to just fill that one out tonight. If you would also like to fill out the weekly one instead and provide a little extra feedback, you are welcome to. You should be able to see assignment 58 in the Google Classroom already. And I did add a note in there to Latonia's point of if you want to attempt this directly in your capstone, instead of doing it for the appliance case, you are welcome to turn in all of your capstone code as well. Okay. You are missing a closing parenthesis that matches line 3. So you've got your opening one there at the end of line 3. So you need a closing parenthesis all the way down at line 7. Oh, not that far down. Thank you, Karen. Sorry to make you scramble there. And scroll down in your terminal, Latonia, and you should be good to go.
Oh,
Or have
thank
a
you. I was
different error.
gonna say, yeah, I was gonna say, I thought I fixed the other thing, but then there was that thing. So thank you.
Celebrate different errors. Karen's probably chuckling because they must have, cohort 1 students must have heard 100 times. We celebrate different errors.
Where did that come from again? Was that just like?
Oh, that's a
Error.
maxism.
Okay, maxism.
Because it's so easy to go, oh, I got another error. Oh, I have a different error, right? And it's like, no. Before we move on to fixing that next error, let's celebrate the fact that we just got rid of that other error. You know, we need to take a moment and say we're making progress here. Because there will be days that you solve 100 errors and you get to the end of the day and it's still not working and you feel like you made no progress, but really you fixed 100 different things and it might just have had 101 different problems.
So on customer JS, the return statement there, that's all one line. That's why it doesn't require the parentheses.
Correct.
Okay. Can I do that with parentheses or should it be giving me problems?
You should be able to do it without parentheses. You should be able to do it with parentheses without
I
problem.
might try taking them out. I don't know. I've got something that's not lined up, but it seems all lined up.
It is 8:35. You guys are free to go. I will stick around for the next 5 minutes just in case you have any questions. If you do get a chance, take a look at the homework assignment. Let me know if you have any questions either here or hit me up in Slack if you have questions about it. But the too long didn't read summary of the entire homework assignment is getting to the point that we were at tonight, which will involve definitely work from yesterday's class as well as some work from tonight's class. You don't have to have the entire front end done. You don't have to have the entire back end done, but you just want to focus on that project setup. So if you do have any questions about that, feel free to hit me up today or at any point this weekend, either in Slack or direct message. So whatever works best for you. If you are only able to get parts of it working, still turn in that assignment. Still show that you're attempting to get it all working. You don't have to do the entire front end. The goal is just to get through project setup and hopefully inspire you for getting things working in your capstone as well. Next week, we will come back to this. We will get our customers working. We will get at least our appliances and our service order table working as well. And then from there, we can decide if we want to go back to the e-commerce site or continue on the appliance case. That is all I have for tonight. You're welcome to peace out if you are entirely fed up with me. Good news is you only have 4 more days with me, not counting office hours. I did send a message out that I am taking next week off from office hours. So if you would like any one-on-one time with me, you have to schedule, I believe, by midnight for availability on Saturday. And I may have 1 slot open on Friday as well, depending on the length. So if you would like one-on-ones, definitely schedule them tonight because my calendar does lock out a day in advance. Otherwise, I will see all of you at office hours 10 a.m. on Sunday. And I will stick around here for a couple more minutes just in case a question pops up. Otherwise, see you guys. Have a good night. Don't forget feedback. $10 a.m. Saturday. I don't know if I misspoke there. I meant 10 a.m. Saturday.
I'm just having some confusion. There aren't 2 DBJS files, are there?
There's a db.js file and the customer.js file.
Right, okay. So the last paste that you did of the db.js is updated from the first one you pasted this evening?
Correct.
Okay, good. I just, for some reason, I thought that can't be. I put it somewhere else in the models. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
And so Max, did you want us to go in and make sure we did a tester? That's the only thing I wasn't able to do.
Yeah, I would test in Postman, both that get and post endpoint. And if that is working, then you have completed the homework.
Great, thank you.
And I know you like extra credit, Latonia, so I added a little twist in there before you turn in the assignment. I basically said if you are feeling really ambitious and want to get it working in the front end, you can use a fetch and get it working over there. But that I was hoping to get to that tonight. I'm also not disappointed with how far we got. I think we got pretty far on project setup. So just wanted to get that one little last piece of magic in, but we will do that on Monday.
Hey Max, this is kind of just like a general timeline question.
Yep.
But, realistically, do we have enough time to get through the rest of the modules and still incorporate stuff? Like, I'm just feeling like I'm behind with database, even though, you know, I know where I'm at because of where we're at. It's just, I just feel like, do we have enough time to actually do everything? Do we still have security and like other stuff?
Yeah, so I don't want to say that the next modules won't matter, but they won't be modules that will be expected to be shown in your capstone. Maybe even like this week, in theory, is the end of new content that would go directly into the capstone. So next week, the goal is just to reiterate on these concepts and go, look, we're doing a lot of stuff in a lot of different files. Let's just repeat that over and over again until we feel comfortable creating endpoints, creating models, getting the associations working, getting the data from the back end to the front end, formatting the data, showing it up, doing some operations on the front end, getting it back in the back end. We're going to do that flow like 4 times, right? Across the appliances, across the service orders, across associations, across all of that stuff. That is going to be all next week. So no new content there, just getting more familiar with the content we've covered so far. The following week, I believe, is, I should pull this up before I talk out of my butt. I know Nathan is the instructor, but I had to pull up what the module names are. Okay, so after this, we go into module 9, which is testing. There's a lot of stuff where you go, wow, I'm writing a lot of code, and I understand that if I change one thing, it breaks. Wouldn't it be nice if we could test our code before we actually, you know, made changes to it or said it's ready to go? So while you definitely could incorporate testing into your capstone, it is not expected that you're going to go in and add testing in. The week after that is infrastructure and deployment. You could definitely deploy your capstone and get it running up on the internet, but it is not expected if you want to demo your capstone just running on your computer. That's also completely fine. After that, we get into cryptography, authentication, and authorization. Hey, it's great if you make your capstone have usernames and passwords, but not the end of the world if you demo your capstone and you're just signed in on your computer and you don't have a username and password to go with it. And then the following week, module 12 is cybersecurity fundamentals and web security, which will have nothing to do with your capstone and will be all about, like, what if I want to go down a career path of doing cybersecurity full time? And so it's not to say that the upcoming modules are not able to be incorporated. There are definitely pieces of every module that you could go, oh yeah, I can see how to incorporate that in my capstone and how I could layer that in. But there is no requirement. It's not like we're going to fail you out of the program if, God forbid, you don't have a database going on in your capstone, or, you know, that you don't have automated testing code written or whatever it is. So there's definitely a lot more content coming, and I'm not by any means saying that this content isn't important. It is definitely important. I am super glad that not only are you getting exposure to this, but that I am also not the one having to teach a security module. I did that last cohort, and it was probably the worst out of all of the modules. So anyway, I'm glad that we have someone coming in, and I feel that way slightly lesser, but to the same extent with DevOps, is you actually have someone who has deployed servers and talks about scaling and can teach you how to get your code out on the internet properly, as opposed to me, which is like, well, I just kept on going and learning until my code ran, and then it's out on the internet, so it's deployed now, right? So Nathan is definitely more qualified to teach you about DevOps, to teach you about automated testing, to teach you about cryptography and authentication and all of that stuff. So you've got great instructors coming up. Nathan is going to cover the next 3 weeks. And then we have someone else coming in for the last module of new content, which is the cybersecurity. And then week 24, which happens to be module 13. It is all instructors, hands on deck, just helping with your capstone. It is 4 nights of class where we are just you're gonna throw out questions. We're gonna go on a one-on-one. We're gonna work through that problem, and you're gonna come back in a group. I'm not sure the logistics of that, or if Jesse has even thought through the logistics of that. But that is the week of August 23rd. And that is just gonna be, I need help on my capstone, and all of the instructors are gonna argue over who thinks they can help you the most on that. And we all fight over you, and then someone wins, and we take you off in a breakout room and help you fix it. And then we come back in, and we're just triaging, right? Just going on to the next student who has the next question, figuring out who can help you the most on it. Or you'll be working with an instructor, and they'll go, I've got no idea how to fix this, but this is a React thing. I wonder if Joey's available. And so we'll jump out of that and pull Joey in, and Joey will help you. So that is how it worked in the first cohort. We had the benefit of all being in person. I thought there was going to be some slap fights that broke out between the instructors arguing over who was going to help the student, but really great environment, and takes you back to participating in a hackathon like Hack Upstates, where you've got that collaborative environment and people willing to help. So that will be module 13, week 24, which happens to be the week of August 23rd. Karen, don't encourage us. All right, I'm way over time. I'm holding you guys. I'm not hearing any questions, so have a great night. Feel free to hit me up in Slack if you have any questions. See you guys.